Didn't see him, but we left kind of early this morning.
Okay, let's get a little niggin going so we can get our blood flowing. La 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 So once again, Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom. Looking forward to studying a little bit with you. Some of you received the materials I sent out.
We say Mazel Tov to Barry and Barbara Epstein. They're celebrating their 58th anniversary. They're having their
Well, we're going on 30. We got a whole year, so it's great. Well, Mazel Tov. Enjoy. The secrets to success. Anybody?
Walking.
Yeah, walking. It's very good. Yeah, secrets.
My marriage, my wife, all the little problems she takes care of, all the big problems are mine. So far, haven't been one big problem.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So we are going to study together today. There's a sheet in front of you. There should be a chumash if you can get one as well. Not that we're necessarily going to use either too much, but you know me already by now. But they're good to have, so you can see that I did the work to prepare. No, actually, I really want to try to.
Oh, you prepared that?
Yeah, I did all of it. 2 times in the original, 1 time with Rashi, so that's every week. But we're going to be looking at Parashat Tavo, and of course, we find ourselves in the book of Deuteronomy, Sefer Dvarim, and it's such an interesting, right, sort of strange name for the book, because what do we know about Moses from before? Moses was what they said, a kvad peh, which means he was heavy of mouth, which means that he didn't talk a lot, right? That's the concept, or he had a difficult time talking, or maybe some people interpret that the things he had to say were so heavy that people had a hard time integrating. So it wasn't that he wasn't talking, they just weren't listening, right? But then suddenly you get this book called Deuteronomy, and what happens? It's as if he's been holding it in these years, like a kid who turns 5 and doesn't talk, and suddenly he says, "Oh, the soup's cold." And he said, "We thought you didn't talk." He said, "Nothing was wrong until now," right? He does a lot of repeating, and some of the repeating, by the way, is an interesting kind of repeating, because some of the repeating is exactly the same, and some of the repeating is slightly a little bit different than was said the first time. By the way, when's the last time parents didn't have to repeat things to their children, right? Moses was a great parent and had to say things over again. You have to ask yourself the question, by the way, at least I do, at what point in time did the Israelites begin to tune out? That's an interesting question. Generally speaking, scholars say that these were actually 3 great orations, right? The whole book of Deuteronomy was 3 great orations by Moses. So I could see 3 long sermons. You could see Rosh Hashanah 1, Rosh Hashanah 2, Yom Kippur, you could get away with it. But if it wasn't, and if it was being repeated on a regular basis, it would sort of to feel like, I don't know, he does protest too much, wondering about this people being able to carry the burden of representing the Almighty and being the chosen Am Nifchar, Am Kadosh, Am Skula, all those names that they use for our people throughout history, or we use for ourselves throughout history.
He's already got examples of when they couldn't.
Yeah, there's
I mean,
no,
they're all over the place.
there's no doubt. And by the way, one could actually say that the whole book of Bamidbar, right, the book of in the wilderness, right, the book of Numbers is a precursor, right? It says, listen, I need to give you some really good instruction because guess what happened, unfortunately, right? We had the book of Numbers and see all the things that happened that it didn't go right, right? So now I need to tell you that I saw what's going to happen. Now a whole book is dedicated to what? To reminding you of the right way in which to proceed in your lifetimes if you want to have a life that follows B'derech Hashem in the way of God. It's not an uncomplicated way in which all of this works. And we could probably spend a lot of time psychoanalyzing both the Israelites and Moses, okay? Coming to the realization that there is this tension, there is this concern, there is this, kind of power struggle. And maybe it's not so different than in any community. Right? There are always folks who kind of adhere to the rules, and there are always folks who don't adhere to the rules. And there's always people who are going to try to interpret the rules in the way in which I saw this the other day. Somebody was turning into the JCC, clearly like nearly took out, a couple of cars on the way, and the cops caught him right there. And the guy said, "What do you mean? It was no big deal. Like they got through the intersection very easily," screeching, yelling, screaming, people putting their heads down, right? I mean, it was actually very dangerous the way they were turning into the JCC. By the way, on the way out, they also turned pretty good. So you could talk to people about it, and sometimes people get it, and sometimes people don't get it. And people's perceptions of who they are and what they are and what they've done is very different maybe than what we see, or maybe, and I'll use this term with quotes around it, reality, what really actually happened, what really actually transpired. While I'm telling this funny story, I'll tell you a funny story. I was in rabbinical school already, and I'd gone home to visit my parents, and my dad had a Sefer Torah in the back seat that he wanted me to drop off the next day to have fixed at the Sofair's place, right? And of course, it was late on a Saturday night. I was home with my friends, and I was driving far too fast. And I came off a bridge, and I see behind me, right? And the lights are flashing, right? And guy comes with a flashlight, right? It's like, I don't know, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night. He flashes first at me, then he flashes to the back seat. He says the Sefer Torah, sees the Sefer Torah. He goes, "Rabbi, I'll get you to the synagogue on time." Gets me right to the shul on time.
Nice.
Get me to the shul on time. That's a great story. I think I got very, very, very lucky. He probably knew that he was doing me a toiva, he was doing me a solid, he was doing me a favor, and I got really lucky because I was really speeding. You better get that Torah right back to the ark,
I think it was a safer Torah, not less safe. But
It was safer. It can't be safer in that.
Safest.
Safest Torah. Okay, so let's take out the sheet first and put it next to your chumash. And open to page 1140. And you'll see this is Parashat Ki Tavo. Okay, the words Ki Tavo. Ki Tavo means what? By the way, it's a hyphenated word, probably, Ki Tavo. At least I write it that way, Ki Tavo. It's Tavo means when you arrive, right? Ki Tavo. When you arrive, right? When you arrive, where are they going to arrive? Ki Tavo el haaretz. To the land, Asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha nachala v'yirishta v'yashavta ba, right? And what's going to happen? Ultimately, sort of the whole story happens here, right? You're going to come to the land, right? What's going to happen? You're going to possess it, and you're going to sit in it. Those are three different realities, right? One is that you're going to what? You're going to, God is going to give it to you. You're going to inherit it. You're going to conquer it, you're going to sit in it, you're going to enjoy it. Okay?
The main point is inherit.
Well, inherited. So let's look at the words exactly. No, take a look. Noten lecha nachala. That's where the et naska is, right? That's sort of like the comma. V'yirishta v'yashavta ba. So I don't know if those are independent issues. Are they related to one another? In other words, there's an element of v'yirishta v'yashavta ba means you inherit it and you sit in it, right? It's not that you inherit it and you don't do anything with it, right? You're going to now sit in it, okay?
But it's like the Seder, the
You're right.
reason.
Yes. So much people, we forget this, by the way. By the way, anybody ever seen that Haggadah that has the multicolors in it? Every time it's a verse from the Torah, it has one color.
Yeah.
Every time it's a verse from the prophets, another Torah,
Yeah.
right? Ah,
I think Rabbi Hal has.
yeah, it's a beautiful Haggadah, and it tells you where things are from, right? It's Nevi'im, Ketuvim, right? Where does it come from? You get a sense that the Haggadah is an unbelievably important book because it does something amazing for Jewish education. You've touched on so many different elements. And by the way, then of course you get into the rabbinic interpretations, right? You get into Mishnah and you get into the Gemara and you get into later commentaries. And by the way, as you add your own commentary, your Okarant, because you're talking about the commentary of today. So the Haggadah is a great lesson in Jewish education in general and Jewish inculcation as well. So it's really a powerful, powerful book. I think sometimes we don't spend as much time as we should thinking about how important it is because we're so used to the Maxwell's version that we've memorized over the course of time. But when you break it down and you look at what's in there, it's pretty amazing. Yes, sir.
Well, our whole history's in there in the one paragraph about bringing the fruits.
Okay, so it's a version of history. That's sort of where I'm going with all of this. What I want to say is that Kitavo is the beginning precursor of the notion that they're going to tell the story, but they're going to tell the story in a number of different kind of ways, right? Think about the Haggadah Shel Pesach. It's told in many different kinds of ways throughout the course of the Seder, right? You tell it through talking, you tell it through singing, you tell it through food, you tell it through actions, right? Passing things around, right? And you add to it over the course of time. People have all these wonderful customs, hitting people with the celery sticks and other kinds of traditions that have. You don't do that.
Onions.
Scallions, sorry. Scallions.
Bottom of
I'm
this
glad
guy.
that somebody here speaks English. So there are all kinds of traditions of what people do. People take the matzah and they wave it over the head of their children or their grandchildren over their own heads. By the way, sounds a little familiar, right? Right before Yom Kippur, you have kaparot, right? This notion of waving things over your head, right? These are very powerful ideas. And so much is contained within Pesach. It's a wonderful really a wonderful holiday. In so many ways, it's the quintessential holiday. What's actually called the quintessential holiday? What's called Hechag? What's Chag? What's actually called Chag?
Purim.
No, so it's called Chag Purim, but the quintessential Chag is Hag is a Hajj, right? But it actually is. Somebody said it. Sukkot. Sukkot is Hechag. That's the holiday of all holidays. By the way, that's why it is elongated, right? How do you elongate it?
Yeah, another day.
You add what?
Days.
You add days at the end and you call them by different names and other kinds of ideas. But the concept is what? You're going to do this holiday. Why? Because it's Vesamachta bechagecha. It's the joyous time. And practically speaking, it's the best time of the year to actually travel to Yerushalayim. Why? It's the most temperate time of the year, right? It's the most temperate time of the year. I mean, it's never, you could have 1,000,000 degrees, right? But it's not in the middle of the rain, right? It's not the middle of the summer, right? It's before the rainy seasons really come. And so there's something about the way in which our tradition lays things out. The reason I have this whole conversation with you is what does it mean to God is going to give it to you, then you're going to what? Then you're going to vigashta, you're going to inherit it, and then you're v'yashavta, and then you're going to sit in it and settle in it. And the piece here that's important is what happens if you don't do the first part, right? What if you don't acknowledge the fact that God gave it to you? What if you don't do the first part?
The next 2, 3 parts won't apply.
Okay, well, yes, then 2 and 3 don't necessarily apply. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe God is giving and we're not taking. Has that ever happened? Has that ever happened before? That God wants to give you something and you don't get it? You don't take it? Are the children of Israel always so open to taking what it is that God wants? Remember all the stories with the Torah, with all these stories that we have in front of us of all the malcontented stories that we have, particularly in this book, right? People aren't always willing to do it, okay? And then vigashta, now it means you conquer it, right? Lareshet et haaretz means you're gonna take charge of it. Now you could also take charge of something and then you could abandon it. Right? So then what's the last part? V'yashavta, you have to sit in it. You have to literally sit in it. There's something about that, right? You can build a house, you can buy a piece of property, you can build a house, you can get all the things that you wanted, and then you can decide what? to sell it or get rid of it or not to live in it, go to Florida. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen that you could see that we're starting this story with Moses making a statement. I'm giving you the land. You're inheriting the land. You're fighting these battles. You're doing all this work for one purpose, which is what? To inherit it and to live in it. To live in it, not to abandon it. And that I think is something very important in many, 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 many ways. This time in our history is a time where we're beginning to see the cracks. I hope and pray that it won't be the case, but there's a lot of Jews who are abandoning. There's a lot of Jews who are abandoning now. A lot of Jews who are turning their backs on Israel. It's not an easy time to love Israel. It's not an easy time to be a Zionist. It's not an easy time to be able to say that despite it all, and despite the mistakes that have been made and will be made and are being made, right, that this is still really, really, really important. And we still have to fight for this. Yeah, I've got to say, unabashedly as a Zionist, there are moments. Don't you get a little bit troubled when you look on television and see 500,000 Zionists? I'm not talking about anti-Zionist, right? Israelis who are serving in the army, who have served in the army, protesting in the streets of Tel Aviv. And it's not uncomplicated for us, right? And are all these people wrong? And it's, well, that's democracy, right? But by the way, sometimes, what do they say? Democracy ain't cut out to what it, isn't as great as everybody wants it to be, right? Because sometimes you have to live with the decisions of democracy. I got to hear Naftali Bennett the other day, which is interesting, whether he's going to enter into the fray once again. He didn't give it away. We asked him to direct the question 3 times, and he didn't answer the question even 1 time. By the way, every time I see Naftali Bennett, his kippah gets smaller. The size of a quarter.
His head gets bigger.
Or maybe it's
That's the right answer.
Had a great idea. I mean, they always tell us, use your good China.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, you have a book, you have a nation, use the Torah, use your religion.
Beautiful. That's a great message. I'm not sure I said it as well as you did. So well done. So I think this is very, very important for us to understand, though, that we're starting out the conversation with this whole conversation about what's going to happen when you inherit the land. And then, of course, what ends up happening later part of this Torah portion, you're going to have the blessings and you're going to have a heck of a lot of curses. And so the issue is that there's a difference between possessing a land, engaged in it, it's yours, it's mine, it's like a relationship. It's ours now. We're in contact with one another. We're in a contract that's an indelible contract. And that's the way they start the conversation. Because I got to tell you, when you read through some of the curses, right, you say to yourself, what? I'm not so sure I want to be involved in this kind of thing, right? The other peoples of the world, maybe they get some of these blessings. By the way, notice how short the blessings are by comparison to the curses, okay? And in general, that's the way the Torah works. And by the way, all ancient Near Eastern treaties work this way, right? There's many more warnings for what's going to fall, your nose is going to fall off, your finger's going to fall off, right? All the kinds of things that they do to scare the living daylights out of you. But the truth of the matter is people would say, oh, for what do I need this? And I hear this, by the way, on campus from kids, right, who I've talked to, right? For what do I need this? Do I really need to identify myself? Do I need to go to that march? Do I need to go to that gathering because I'm going to be singled out then as a Jew and then people are going to be unhappy with me? This is a really complicated time in our history. And so I hope we're doing the best that we can to support our students, support ourselves, to support our children and our grandchildren, because I don't think that there's going to be an easy solution to this. I wish it was, it's going to be one of those wars that's over. I think this is going to be an extended battle that's going to last for some time. Unfortunately, I wish it were otherwise. It's already dragging on. And by the way,
Ever, apparently.
longest ever. And by the way, still there are people who don't call it a war. Right? There's a conflict, but is it really a war at this point in time? It seems to me it's a war. Go live in northern Israel right now. Okay, go live in northern. It's a war. Okay.
You know what I noticed
Yeah.
on the way here? What we didn't have, and I think it was at the Foster's house. In fact, there were no signs out there saying their kid goes to Mandel Day School. Last year and the years before, my child goes to Jesu, and that also signs are not on
Interesting.
one.
It may be that we're taking down the signs. On the other hand, there's the signs that the Federation gave out. And by the
That
way,
is-
we noticed something interesting the other day. There's a sign in our front, on our, what you call a tree line here. I've never heard that before. Love the term, the tree line. And we put one of the orangey sign and the blue sign. So we put the blue and white sign on the tree line because it's really facing the street and you can see it better than pulling it back. And, pardon me?
Not allowed to put it on public property.
Oh,
It's gotta be on your own.
maybe that's why they took it down. I was gonna think that somebody came by, Polly said, and took the sign down. And they, I mean, they laid it back on the yard, but maybe it's because, I'm not allowed to, I'm gonna put it back up on my lawn.
The irony of tree lawns is that you maintain it. In other words, you cut the grass.
You don't own
But it's technically part of the street.
Okay, so now I forgive them. I don't want to be angry for no reason. I lots of good reasons
They'll
to be
also
angry.
take care of the tree if it's on
Yeah.
there, so.
Okay,
it's
good.
and bad.
I feel better. Thank you for making me feel better. I don't want to, scratch everything and find anti-Semitism, right? Like, we start to get to that place, unfortunately.
Yes.
That's a whole other problem.
Right, well, that's true. That's our problem. Okay, let's do a little study. Yes, sir.
The other problem I see is that we don't outwardly identify ourselves as Jews. Like,
A lot more people are wearing Magen Davids.
I'm
they
talking
say-
about on your tree lawns,
No, not on the tree
on
line.
your flags, and talking to people, if someone says, are you Jewish? You go, okay, and that's it. I don't go into it at all.
I understand.
And I think that there are some kids who are not putting mezuzahs up on their. dorm
Putting it on the
with
inside
that.
of their door, not on the
Yeah.
outside of their door, all these
Yeah.
kinds of things, kids being told to wear their Magen David inside their shirt, not outside their shirt. Listen, we're living in a time, say it again?
People are scared.
Yeah.
Said some of them are not scared enough in a way. My kids, who are much older, of course, they're frightened. They said, well, that's what happened to Abba in Germany. And they're very conscious of these things.
I will tell you that people who have grandparents or parents who survived the Shoah understand this in a way that we don't, or feel it in a way that we don't. I even know it from my mom, whose parents were Holocaust survivors. She was born in the United States when they arrived, but they came in 33, right, from Austria.
Okay.
And they were the only members of their family who came, and the rest of them you can find in the dust of Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Right? All of them. Wealthy family, tried to
Yeah.
buy their way out, but in 33 they left, and I wouldn't be here if not for that decision that they made. And it was a very hard decision because they arrived, they came both from wealthy families. We know that more now than we knew it before because some of the buildings and things that belonged to my grandparents have now been discovered. What did they give us? $25,000 for the building that was worth probably, right? When there were reparations of any sort. For a long time, my mom didn't get any reparations because all of the documents were destroyed, right? They had nothing. Only through cousins who were living in Australia and other kinds of things, ultimately did they find anything. But the truth of the matter is, if you are children of survivors or grandchildren of survivors, you know this in a different kind of way because it's on the lips and on the tongue. There was a beautiful but powerful poem that the daughter of a very prominent rabbi in Winnipeg, his name was Weitzman, and he was the chief rabbi of Winnipeg for a long time, Weitzman. And she wrote poetry about her father after he died, including every time he spoke, I smelled the gas on his breath. Because he talked about it, right? That's what he talked about. Inside their synagogue, can you imagine the main sanctuary of your synagogue? There were 6 huge yahrzeit candles. Like they were electric by that point, but at one point they were lit every single day. 6 yahrzeit. I mean, it was and we have a bima, we have a Torah. You have some of the most beautiful art here in your synagogue here, and you change the mantles and the cover. I mean, it's gorgeous to be here. But can you imagine coming into synagogue and the only thing you really see are 6 memorial candles? I mean, the whole generation of those people lived thinking that way. Right, until ultimately the next generation came along and said, we're going to move it to the back of the sanctuary and make an area. But the folks who were survivors or the children of those folks who had originally come were irate. They left the synagogue. You know what Jews do? They start another synagogue, right? Like if it's, I don't know, Anshe Chaim, they'll start Anshe Mavet, right? If it's the people of life, they'll start death, whatever. They'll start it right across the street, right? In order to make the point. But it was a very difficult time. And as a kid, I didn't understand what they were fighting about. I really didn't understand it. But now as an adult, I can appreciate where is the emphasis? Is the emphasis on the early childhood center and singing Bim Bim Bam? Or is the emphasis on remembering our tragic lachrymose history? And those are really big challenges for the Jewish people. And they continue to be, especially now as we return to a time where we're seeing more of the anti-Jewish and anti-Israel sentiment. It's complicated, and I hope and pray that we can bring some kind of stasis here. But I want to look at Kitavo for a moment, okay? Somebody want to read a little bit for me in English? It says in the Torah portion. Nobody.
Where do you want?
On the paper.
Oh.
I fooled you.
In the Torah
In the Torah portion, yes.
Go for
of
it.
Kitavo, there are a total 98 curses which threaten the Jewish people if they turn away from God and the ways of Torah.
98 curses, right? That's a heck of a lot of curses, okay? Let's go on.
These curses are preceded by a series of blessings that will come to fruition if the Jewish people cling to God and the ways of Torah. These 98 curses are better categorized as the natural results, the consequences of the Jewish people abandoning their national.
By the way, you'll take a look, and they emphasize 98 curses. What they don't tell you is how few, okay? And there are fewer, you can count them, you can go through it. That's not the emphasis of this class right now, but you should feel free to do that for homework. Okay, keep on going, next paragraph.
In the portion of Bechukotai in the book of Leviticus, there's a similar series of blessings and curses. But in that portion, there are 49 curses, exactly half of 98 we have in Kitavo. Many commentaries understand the curses of Bechukotai to relate to events leading up to the destruction of the first temple and the subsequent 70-year exile to Babylonia, whereas the 98 curses of Kitavo are seen as relating to the events leading up to the destruction of the second temple, and the 2000-year exile that's followed.
So one is a shorter version of it, right, of curses, and this is greater. Why? Because it comes at when? Not the destruction of the first temple, but the destruction of the second temple. And we know that what? The destruction of the second temple in many ways was deflating to the people of Israel in a way that the destruction of the first temple was not. Why was that?
The length of the exile, for one thing, was a relatively short exile the first time.
That's right. So within a 70-year period, they're back, right, rebuilding the temple. And that process began almost immediately. That's, like I just built the house, so I know it doesn't take 70 years, but it takes 70 years to recover, right? And people have to come back. And by the way, the second temple versus the first temple was probably, well, not quite as grand, right? The project the second time around did not have the same kind of engagement and its involvement as the first one did. Why was that? That's because it was the first. There was something about it. People were really moved. People really felt that this was a bait for Hashem. This was a house for God. And by the time that they had the second temple, they had suffered losses and consequentially people lived where? By the rivers of Babylon. And what did you see in Babylon? The pepper pike of the ancient world, right? And you know what? Did you really want to go back to a land that had been salted over, right? A land that wasn't growing fruit the way it was grown in other places. And it was, business was really good in Babylon, right? If you could live, have a business in Babylon and a business in Israel, you'd probably be okay. Why? From the money you earned in Babylon, not from the money you earned in Israel. There was this whole notion that it was going to be just as good. And candidly speaking, it probably was not. Moreover, there was an opportunity for people to think nostalgically about what had happened during the time of the first temple, but many, many, many people did not buy into that concept. And even the pilgrimages, from what we know, were not as grand as they were during the time of the first temple. People had just had a taste of diaspora. And if you tell somebody that you're going to live in Boca Raton, right, versus, I don't know, these days, northern Israel, some people might choose Boca. It's a little less complicated, right? Not that much, but a little less complicated.
More complicated in different ways.
Too hot. Okay, let's go on. Read one more paragraph?
Oh, sure. Where am I? The 98 curses?
Yeah. In Bechukotai, the idea of
Israel. In Bechukotai, the idea of Israel being punished 7 times for their sins emerges. This relates to the reason expressed in that portion that the underlying reason for the destruction of the temple and the exile was because the people did not observe the sabbatical year, and thus, in order for the land to receive its due rest every 7 years. The people had to be sent into exile. The 70-year exile was a measure for measure result of the 70 sabbatical years Israel as a nation did not observe.
You understand? So they didn't observe these sabbatical years, and
Punished.
so this was a kind of a punishment, and so it lasted for this period of time. It's a nice explanation. Is it the right explanation, the wrong explanation? Is it a fanciful explanation? It's a theory, okay? But we get the concept. Jews love, and in Jewish tradition in particular, loves the notion of midah, keneged midah, measure for measure. You do it this way, right? You'll get it this way. You do it that way, you'll get it that way. It gives a kind of sense of a justice, right? A divine justice that exists in the world. And you know, you deserve this zetz. You deserve this punch, right? It's like when my brothers, I'm one of 4 brothers and I have a sister as well. She's perfect, but the rest of us not all the time. Right? She's also the youngest she's 30 years younger than I am, right? 25, 27 years younger. I have an older brother. The boys, we fought like cats and dogs. Right? And what you touched me, I have to touch you twice. You hit me, I have to hit you harder. Right? There is that sort of game that goes on. And of course, we were smart enough because we went to yeshivas as kids to say, that's midah keneged midah, it's measure for measure. Right? And so we punched him and you punch me and punch him. It was fun growing up in our house. We talk to each other sometimes. Okay, now let's go back. The 98 curses of Kitavo relate to the seemingly never-ending exile that followed the destruction of the Second Temple. Here we are, right? Here we are, 2,000 years still in exile, right? Although the rebirth of Israel in 1948 is seen by some as the beginning of the end of the exile, that process of our deliverance is certainly not yet complete. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Right. Is there anybody in this room who, by the way, like doesn't buy this theory? It's okay to not buy this theory. Like, is this really what God wanted? You ever ask yourself that question? You're comfortable with it. I just want to make sure because I've said
I have a thought.
it's a what?
It's a reason that we make up to explain the situation.
Okay, but do you buy into this? In other words, is this a sacred mythology that we're buying into? This appears to be a very linear way in which to talk about history.
Yeah, I think it depends on, so to speak, who you are. Many people in my neighborhood, I'm sure, would absolutely buy into it because what's the choice? You have to buy into it. That's what it is. So that's the end of that. And we're all much further from Sinai than this.
Right.
So if we have a discomfort, that's our problem.
Okay.
That's the kind of answer a lot of people in my neighborhood, since I've studied with some of them, will give. On the other hand, you could think of it as, I think this is kind of where Sheila was going. So Sheila, correct me if I'm wrong. But if the lesson is you're accountable to God, then you could say, okay, doesn't this look like maybe it's measure for measure? It's a way of showing that there's some kind of accountability, whether we like the answer or whether the answer is above our pay grade, so to speak, or what have you. At least we have that, even though some of the folks in my neighborhood would say the fact that you had to go trying to find that just shows that you're not getting it. So it depends on who you are and whether you think you're getting it one way versus another way.
Sitting in a conservative synagogue, right? The historical critical movement of Judaism, right? Where we study history, and it's very, very, very important for us to understand things in their historical context, not the hysterical context, okay? And I say that because I want to juxtapose those two things, right? Right? Is everything a punishment or a reward? Is that the way we see the world? And for some people, it works, right? But I think for us as folks who've studied historically, critically what's gone on, you know, there are moments in time that feel like there are great breaks from this notion of exile. Or there are great moments in time where in certain parts of the world, things feel really good, and other parts of the world where things feel really, really, really bad. And there are ways in which to look at the world in the sense of, well, you know, had the Israelites, the Jewish people simply stayed in the land of Israel in perpetuity, everything would have been great. But then you have to remember that there were 2.5 tribes who didn't even want to inherit the land, right? So they decide to live on the other side of the Jordan. So, right, so the question becomes, you know, what we have. And I think it's a really important statement to make. And I can say it as a conservative Jew and a person of great faith, is that what we have in our tradition, in our Torah, in our Tanakh, is a kind of a way in which to kind of gloss over I've been watching these late at night, these terrible commercials about redoing my garage, right? And they come with this gray kind of coating and they put it over your garage, right? So it looks beautiful. You don't have any of the cracks anymore. And it looks like an ice skating rink. It almost looks like it's glistening, right? And I say, maybe I should have a garage like that because mine don't look like that, okay? Mine's got a lot of schmutz and other kinds of things. And I think it would be glistening. But on some level, you know, what we do is we kind of gloss over, first of all, the fact that it's not a consistent, right? And it doesn't go from here to here to here to here to here to here to here, right? Sometimes it goes like this and it goes like this and goes like this, right? That's called living, right? The beating of your heart. And history works that way. And in some places, things last for a very, very long time as wonderful. And then the bottom falls out, right? And in other places, it can be very, very bad for a long period of time. And then suddenly it can emerge and rise like a phoenix from the dustbin of history. And we see this. And so the notion of things being consistent, good equals good, bad equals bad, doesn't seem to work in our reality. And let alone, right, people, right? You're a good person. God forbid, you get sick, right? Now, of course, all of us do the cheshbon hanefesh, right? We do the evaluation. Did I deserve, is this a punishment? How about the possibility that it's just, pardon my terminology, lousy luck, right? People get sick, right? Diseases don't necessarily attack people who are bad because they're bad. Sometimes really good people get afflicted with terrible diseases.
On biology.
Right, yeah, okay. So when does science, right, take over for the kind of mythology, right, mythological thinking of the Tanakh, which lays things out in a very black and white way? And by the way, I love the games that they're going to play. 49 of this, 98 of this. It's really good. It's nice. It's cute. It makes you smile, right? And there are reasons for it. But in the bottom line of all of this is, if the Torah wrote, right, with many more curses, double the number of curses than they wrote of blessings, there must be what?
A reason.
A reason. And the reason is to scare the living heebie-jeebies out of you so that you should try to fly right and get some of those blessings as opposed to some of these curses. And again, Moses is a master pedagogue. If you don't see that throughout the Torah, you missed the whole point of all of this, right? And particularly by the time you get to the end of it, to Deuteronomy, where he really understands that his time is limited. And what's he doing? He's talking to the people, and it's like shvoch, right? Pouring it out, right? It's just coming out of him. He wants to share because he loves his people so much, and he wants them to succeed. And he tries to do it in a way that will both rile people up, meaning introspection, tshuva, right? Evaluating your ways. And on the other hand, promises of what? Of goodness and greatness and glory and happiness and prosperity. And it's a really tough road to hoe, I will tell you. As a congregational rabbi, when did, so some of the people in this room will appreciate this. Do you remember when rabbis delivered fire and brimstone sermons? Right? Do you remember those days? And they bang on the stender and they said some pretty difficult things and they weren't nice things to hear. And some people in the audience would say, way to go, Rabbi. You tell them, Rabbi, right? You tell them, Rabbi, not you tell me, Rabbi. You tell them. By the way, it's very important. You tell them, because when those people are hearing it, they're hearing that they're not bad, that there are other people out there that are bad that need to correct their ways, right? Our problem is that we don't like to hear that anymore. Yeah. Any rabbi who stands on the bima and chastises people too much, is not going to be the rabbi in that location for very long. Yeah. By the way,
rabbis finally figured out that there's preaching to the choir, the ones that you talk to, the ones that aren't there.
Okay, but you know what? So that's an interesting comment. Did you hear what he said? He said, sometimes preaching to the choir. I'll say the following. As a rabbi who's done this 30 years, sometimes I'm preaching to myself. Any sermon that I don't want to hear, I shouldn't give out loud. Because sometimes it's motivational, right? Sometimes it's really motivational to say, hey, listen, buddy, just 1 second. I want you, I got to get back to who I am. Return to who you are, what you are, right? There's an element of that. And Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur are a good time. We can countenance it. Yeah. I'm not so sure that banging on the stender and telling people that they're bad and they've done wrong is the best way to go about doing it. There are other ways in which to do that in this world. And it's not because I think rabbis are fraidy cats. I don't think so. I think you have to be very brave to be a rabbi, and especially a congregational rabbi. Be very brave to do that, because almost anything that you do, somebody's not gonna like.
Yeah.
You wore a blue tie, you should have worn a red tie, and it's, oh, it's a political statement. That was the first tie I pulled out of my dark closet when I got up this morning to go to Vineyard, right? How to be red, so you must be, you know. People do say and think all kinds of things that are absolutely silly. Okay, a couple of comments, yeah, 1, 2, yeah.
Yeah, with an apology to those who go through all the JFX and all those classes. There are people, why do they go to that? Because they get an answer. What happens in the next world? What role is God? You know, that if you're good, God will help you. That is basically the message. We went to one of them because we got curious enough at JCC, as a matter of fact. We were curious, what do they say that is so attractive? And conservative and Reform Jews want a rationale for things. They don't, you just can't tell us, you know, God will take care of us if we're good. You've got to do, you have to understand more context. We require more knowledge in a way.
It's true. You know, I think you're right that one of the things about conservative and Reform Judaism in their origins, not how they're practiced by everybody, because that would be unfair to say that, right? But people tend to be learners. They tend to be wanting to grow. They want to understand the background. What I think we miss, and I'm gonna just defend my brothers and sisters at JFX, or I don't really know the organizations here, so I apologize, I can't comment on any one of them. But many of the outreach organizations, right, the K-Roof, to draw you close organizations, do something that we don't do well. There are two parts of it. Number one, they accept you for who you are. Chabad's well known.
Right.
Whoever you are, you
That's
come
why
in
they're so
and
successful.
they're successful because who you are, and their expectation of you is really none, right? If you do, great. If you don't do that, so great. If you do one little mitzvah, it'll make a difference. You put on tefillin, and you know, these kinds of acts, there's a kind of a sympathetic magic to it, right? If you do this thing and the world changes, you're making a cosmic difference. And when you tell somebody that if you just put on this tefillin, or you just put up this mezuzah, or you just say this bracha, you're having a cosmic difference. Who wouldn't want to make a cosmic difference? I would. I'd
And
like
they
to make it.
also,
Yeah.
they also take care of what, in some places, they take care of each other
Right.
to a certain extent.
gonna say that.
Either accept you, or in many cases, I mean, we have had members who went to Chabad and then came back here.
Yeah.
Because they somehow were not included in the group.
In the they. So the notion of acceptance is another piece. There's also something else here. All of us want to have, I think, and I shouldn't say all of us, let me say for myself and people that I know well, everybody wants the easy answer, or an answer, the answer. And you know, the one thing about many of these groups is they are true believers.
Yeah.
You can't argue with a true believer. If you come to me and say to me, is the Torah true? And I will say yes. And then you'll say to me, is the Torah true? And I'll say no. It's true with a capital T, but it's not true with a lowercase t. Not everything here is as it seems. And by the way, you know how I know that? From a traditional Jewish perspective. If it was true and easy to understand, you wouldn't need a million different commentaries on the page. You wouldn't have machloket, you wouldn't have argument, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven.
But
Right? Do you wrap your tefillin in or do you wrap your tefillin out? There are people who used to fight and hit each other in my yeshiva, right? We wrap out. That's the way we wrap. Right? We don't wrap in. That's how I grew up, okay? And I went to yeshiva and they said, this is an Ashkenazi yeshiva, you're rapping like a Sephardi. First, it wasn't true, it was Chabad. I was rapping in the Hasidic way, which was my family tree. You're doing it wrong. Right? Doing it wrong. You know, ignorance often leads to people saying things that they have no idea what they're talking about, right? When it comes to kashrut, there are many different levels of kashrut, right? The simple notion that it's kosher. If it was so simple, why would you have 9 organizations that give you a stamp of approval on a bottle of water? And you're going to say it's business. It's not business. I don't think it's business. I think it's ideology. And ideology can be a beautiful thing, but ideology can also be a thing that separates people. And I will say to you very, very honestly, I love that people care. I love that they care enough to put 9 hectares on a bottle of water. God bless them, okay? I just hope at the same time, there are 9 of them are gonna go out and help children who don't have food, and people who can't pay their mortgages, and people who are sick and need helping having food brought to their homes. Because if you're worried about what's going in your body, you better be also worried about what's coming out of your body. And I mean that in terms of the actions that you perform in the world and the words that you articulate and the sentiments that you share with other people. If you're worried in equal measure about those things, geh Gesundheit. Enjoy your life. But if you're jaundicing, what you're putting in the body more, what hechsher's on it, more than was it made ethically, right? Then you missed the mark. That's why I'm very much in favor of many of these new groups of people who are giving hechshers that are also eco-friendly hechshers. Sensitive to, should styrofoam, should plastic, these plastics that are not recyclable, be kosher anymore? Or should some rabbi stand up and say, styrofoam is treif because it kills our planet?
Yeah.
Are they saying that because it kills our planet, or are they trying to make a name for themselves? Because
I'll say,
all this machmir business.
okay, well, I'll say to you, Rebbetzin, Rebbetzin, yesh v'yesh. There are some people who really do it out of a heart.
It's machmir business.
Yeah, machmir means to be more punctilious, right? To be, more chamur, to live to a higher standard.
People who grew up in New York and kept kosher. I remember when we came here, we laughed. There was another New Yorker from the Orthodox community, and we were sort of laughing. What's wrong with spaghetti? Why does it need a hechsher? Plain spaghetti.
So,
why does
7 hechshers for Pesach on a bottle of water?
I can tell you one thing, though. If you go to that class I went to, there are people there who are yearning to have 9 hechshers on things that don't require a hechsher, because A, you don't have to learn whether it requires a hechsher or not, and B, I'm doing it because this one's no good because he buries birds. That's the one you've got to rely on.
I'll just tell you, and we got to go on with the lesson here, but and you had a comment in the corner, but I'll say to you the following. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's not your fault. It's mine. I'll say that the piece here is we've got to be very careful. You know what I'd rather suggest to people? I would suggest to people the following. Why don't you be more achmir with yourself, right? Be really punctilious with your own observance, and give the benefit of the doubt to other people and how they're doing their observance. And if we live that way, a little bit more punctilious about who we are and what we do with our time, energy, money, resources, I think we'd all be in a better place, and less looking outward as to what other people are doing. Okay, you get the last comment, then we're going to finish this up. Yeah.
Back to the difference in disparity between curses and blessings. I think I was taught that the blessings carry more weight, so they're worth more.
So you don't need as many.
You don't need as many, because if you follow the blessings, most of those curses go away anyways.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's like,
I like
buy
that.
one, get one free.
It's a really nice explanation. I love it for myself. Then I ask myself the question, so what if I just doubled or tripled the good blessings? Would people be more attracted to a religion that promises double and triple blessing as opposed to double curses? I just asked that question.
What's a blessing?
Oh, so hold on. You just asked the perfect question. Take a look over here. There have been many attempts to interpret the curses of these two portions in a more positive light, and even to see hidden blessings, right? They're hidden blessings. This is the line of Nachum Ish Gamzo. Remember him? Nachum Ish Gamzo, who is known to say about what seemed to be initially a negative occurrence, Gamzu Latova. That was why they called him Gamzu. This too, right? This too is for a blessing. His student Rabbi Akiva, along the same lines, would say, all that God does is for the good. Even as he was being tortured to death, he found a way to interpret it as an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, right? The skin is being pulled off his body, right? And he's saying, you're looking for somebody?
I got it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I apologize for going long, but it's the group's. It's my wife's fault.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, it's okay. Okay, so you see what he's saying? In other words, the notion of Gamzu Latova, this is also for the good. Meaning, what does he do? Other than you to say they're so powerful that they don't need as many of them, right? He says something else. The curses themselves too You know why? Tell me why. Why could a curse be a good thing?
Guardrail.
Guardrail?
Keep you in line.
What else? What else is it? Isn't there a clarification in a certain kind of difficulty,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? In a certain kind of suffering, don't you, right? Think about it, even in the little bits that we do. Yom Kippur, Tisha B'Av, the other minor fast days. There is something in that little bit of holding back. And I'll say it like this. We live in a society that's very Nike, right? Just do it. Jewish tradition doesn't say just do it, right? Jewish tradition says if you're going to do it with consciousness. And some things, nish, just don't do, right? Some places just don't go. There are some things that you shouldn't do. That's a tradition, I think, that makes a lot of sense. And so instead of saying, oh, I can't eat pork, you could say gamzu l'tova. This is also for the good. Now, in the time of why pork wasn't eaten, there are a lot of explanations. It likely had to do with health, okay, at one point in time, okay? But it also differentiated gamzu l'tova. This gives me an opportunity to be different than other people. It gives me a sense of identity, right? And having an identity in a world that is moorless, right, where there's no moorings, is really a real great blessing to know that we don't do this way. This is saying in Yiddish, anza. From our people, we don't do it. Okay. By the way, even amongst Jews, right, when somebody says, I don't do it that way, right, respectfully, if they say it, I respect them. Say, okay, I understand you don't do it this way, right? Listen, how about people who wait 72 minutes, right, till after, right, Shabbos ends? And they're waiting and they're waiting and waiting. It's Tuesday already and they're still waiting for Shabbos to end. Okay? It's like, I get it. And if it works for you, great. And if it gives you existential consequence and meaning and a sense of a connection to the divine, Baruch Hashem, thank God we have that opportunity. But the one thing you shouldn't do is say, somebody's waiting 60 minutes, you're not a Jew. Or you're not a mitzvah Jew, right? Because that, castigating people does nothing good. And if I can say anything, since we're close to the high holidays about this, is that might be the best blessing that we could have, is that we stopped looking at one another and evaluating how we compare to one another, as opposed to looking inward and comparing ourselves to the versions of ourselves that we want to be. That would be, I think, the most helpful part of all this. Okay, let's finish up.
And on the same line there, how similar we are as opposed to how different we are.
That's right.
I think that's the biggest fault
Binds us
some of us
together.
make,
Right.
is that we're always looking to why people are different as opposed to looking at why we're all similar.
I think
We're all created in the image of God.
beautiful. I was speaking on a panel of rabbis, and it was an Orthodox rabbi, a conservative rabbi, and 2 Reform rabbis. We were speaking on a panel, and it was called 4 Rabbis, Unlimited Opinions. For 4 Rabbis, Unlimited Opinions. It's a great name because I came up with it. No. Unlimited Opinions. And the truth of the matter was that after every session, we would stay on, the 4 rabbis afterwards, and talk and say, as much as I disagree with you on some things, I really agreed with you so much. And we would say, yeah, there's more that unites us than divides us. Yeah. Right? And that doesn't always happen, but if you dig down deep, you find out there's more that unites us. Okay, I want to finish up just this section, okay? Do I have a few more minutes? You okay? Okay. Are we at the Kiddush yet? Okay. The Alter Rebbe, which means the old Rebbe. This is the Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was the founder of what's called Chabad or Lubavitch. By the way, Chabad and Lubavitch are synonymous with one another, right? Chabad is the name of the movement. Chochma, Bina, and Da'at. Chabad, they were thinking in mystical terms of the Sfirot. Those were the 3 Sfirot they wanted to focus in. And Lubavitch was the city they came from. Okay? Not everybody who lived in Lubavitch, right, was a Lubavitcher Chassid. Okay? They might have been from Lubavitch, but they could have been not even Hasidic. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It became known as Lubavitch, and that's why they use Chabad much more than they use Lubavitch, because Lubavitch is a city and Chabad is a concept. Yes. Right? You get it? It's a kind of an existential philosophical concept. Okay, the founder of Hasidism, Lubavitch Hasidic movement, was a Bal Koreh, which means what? He read the Torah, which we've already missed by now, I'm sure. The one who, that was a joke, you can laugh. Okay, the one who reads the Torah publicly in the synagogue. He was known to be very exacting with the reading of the Torah according to the exact established musical cantillation. Okay, very good. Who reads the Torah publicly, etc. He was known to be very exacting in the reading of the Torah according to the exact musical cantillation. One year, when the 98 curses, right, found in the Torah portion of Kitavo were read, the Alter Rebbe was away on a business trip, right? For communal purposes. By the way, notice we had in there communal purposes. He wasn't going like on a vacation to Aruba. Okay, he was going on a trip for what? Raising money, probably. Raising money, right? Or doing what's called pidyon shvuim, which means what? Releasing captives, taking the money that he raised to go to places and give the money to the people there, and they would release the captives. Okay, so what happened? While the standard person was reading the curses, the son of the Alter Rebbe, Dov Ber, right? Known as the Maggid of Messrich, what happened, who later led the movement when his father passed away, heard the curses and literally fainted. Wait a second. When his father read the curses, he didn't faint? When this guy read the curses, he did faint? Why? Why? Right?
It'll tell you.
He was bedridden for, yeah, but tell me before we get to the punchline. Why? There's at least two reasons I can think of.
He heard it
Existing law.
He heard it differently. Why? Why was it different?
He said it lower.
He said it lower, okay?
Wasn't his father saying it?
Okay, so here is, I think, the most beautiful explanation. When you're tati, when your father chastises you and you hear the voice of your father, you can deal with it. You know why? Because you know tati loves you. Your father, your grandfather loves you. And you know what? Tati doesn't want anything bad to happen to you, and therefore Tati will protect you, right? When you hear it from somebody else's voice, you say, oh my God, you know how horrific this stuff really is? Women will eat their children, right? It's like listening to Echa, right? And that kind of, and by the way, one of the things that I have found, and I used to say this all the time, you know, when you have somebody with too nice a voice who reads Eicha, it's jarring for me, right? Eicha yashva vada, ahira batia. I could listen to this all day. Our Chazan had that kind of, in St. Louis, had that kind of very wafy, lovely voice. And it was like listening and people say, oh, this is so beautiful. And it is on some level beautiful. But what's it supposed to be? Right? It's supposed to be boom, kind of hit you. So this story of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's, right? Of the Alter Rebbe, and then the next Rebbe, Dov Ber Mezrich, tells you something interesting when you hear it from your father. Now, the other side of all of this is that what? You're going to hear the curses, but guess what? Yeah, say them softly, that happens, say them softly, but say them with love. So what was happening was the Rebbe was reading it, okay, from the Rebbe, I could take it because I knew the Rebbe loved me and he was saying these difficult chastisements because he wanted me to improve. Some other Chaim Yankel, you know, gets up there and reads them, and there was no finesse. There was no finesse. And all I heard was, and they're going to peel the skin off you, right? Boom, 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 boom. And he fainted because he said, oh my God, this stuff could really happen. When Tati said it, I didn't hear it that way. Let's just read the end. When asked why he reached so strong into hearing it, reacted, right? He had heard them many times before. He answered that previously had only heard them chanted by his father, and when his father recited them, all he knew was the voice, right? And so he heard blessings in disguise. Poppy was, you know, it was a curse, but it was really a blessing in disguise. This time, though, when hearing the curses, right, he heard them for what they really were chastisements, were curses, were klalot, as we say. Okay, now last line here. This is maybe right? This is really good. It can be noted that the word to life in Hebrew, lechaim, the spontaneous expression of the Jews' natural desire for life and goodness equals life. Although curses go away, the balance for us is here. Right? They're 98. Okay, I get you got 98 curses, but guess what? What do we also have? Have the Chaim. We have the Chaim. And in the end, right, goodness will therefore trump negativity, right? Anytime we say l'chaim, it has the power to counter the negativity contained in the 98 curses and affirms our determination to make our lives into expressions of goodness and love. So when you read Parashat Ki Tavo, right, you can walk away from Parashat Ki Tavo going, oh my God, all is lost. And by the way, in these days, and listen, let's get honest, it's not the worst time in Jewish history. Okay, we've been through a lot, and we will prevail. I have no doubt. Of that, I'm 100% sure. We will move on. We will be able to surmount this moment in time and transcend it, no doubt. But also, I think we need to remember that there always are glimmers of hope, and sometimes the glimmers of hope are even coded into the Torah itself, even in the midst of the worst curses that one could imagine. And if you want to have a good sleep, don't read these this afternoon, okay? Don't read them this afternoon. We have the glimmer of hope that 98 is coded in here to tell you that in the end, what will succeed, what will prevail? Chaim. Yud, yeah, by the way, most kids, when they're in Hebrew school, they spell Chaim, Et, Yud, Mem, Sofi, right? These kids just don't know it, right? Because if you put Cha and Im, right, a little dot underneath the Yud is Im, right? They don't get why there are two Yuds. It's something you have to explain to people over the course of time. That's the default in Hebrew. If you take a look at the word of Chaim, right? There's La, Cha, Yim, right? So what do you have? Chai, Chet, Yud, Yud, Mem. What's in the middle of Yud, in the middle of the word Chaim? Double Yud, which is what?
And it's mem. No, it's Chet mem.
Yeah.
God is warm.
Yeah.
Want to make a play on it?
But I just want to say that it's is dependent on our adherence to the ways of God consciousness within us. Even in the darkest moments, know that God is with us. Even in the Anochi lo b'tzara, I am with you, even in the moment of your greatest difficulty. And we're heading into, a time of the year that's problematic. Well, I could go around and I'll spend more time on this, but what's really problematic about this time of year, number one, you have the question, is it efficacious? Would it really work? Is all our davening and all our clapping and clapping and clapping. By the way, sometimes I worry about people. They get so hard on the clapping that they, like that's not a defibrillator, right? You got to be really careful. But I'll say that we do a lot of this. But do we feel it to be efficacious? You don't have to answer out loud, but we ask ourselves the question: is all of these words efficacious? That's number one. Number two, is this should we be thinking about a different kind of living or a different kind of way in which we do teshuva that is more germane to the reality in which we find ourselves? Or is teshuva different in every era or in every year because there's things that need fixing, tikkun, repair in this era, right? What are the things that we need fixing for in this era? And thinking about that and making that available to ourselves during the high holiday season. Hopefully that's what Sermonica does, right? The sermons help us with that. Right, but I've got to say, I wondered to myself if instead of all of the readings that we have, all the language that we go through, of the machzor, all of the words that we intone, if we were to pause and say, okay, this year the theme is going to be such, and so we're going to riff on the theme in a whole wide variety of contemporary reflections on, And I know for a lot of people will that make us feel like the Reform movement or the Reconstructionist movement, right? But I wonder to myself, for the vast majority of people as we're going through Musaf, do they really get what's going on? Yeah. And I think we know the answer is that the vast majority of people, maybe the vast majority of us, don't really understand, don't understand the words. It's there in English, you can look it up, but it doesn't really work for us. For many it does, right? They're for many because the melodies and the surroundings and the large crowds, they help us. But the question is for the next generation of young people in particular, what's going to speak to them? I was out at Camp Wise and I realized something interesting. Even the new have become old. I'll tell you how. Right? They finish their Friday night service with the same song every time, right? What's that song? Come on, people now, smile. Yeah. And I'm looking around this room at these pishalach, you know, like these 7, 8, 9, 10 years. No idea when this song was. Idea of the context. Or they're reading Shel Silverstein, who's died by now, right? Like, so. Am I in the way here? So the question is, I love the notion of singing something contemporary. But at what point in time has the contemporary is no longer contemporary? It no longer speaks in the idiom of the people who are sitting in the space, and should we be looking for or finding something that makes more sense? I don't know, ask yourself the question, what would be and you're allowed to say the liturgy is just fine, because I said that already, right? If it works for you. But would there be something that would make sense to you to have as part of your liturgy in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur that would make a difference for you? Yeah. What would you? Yeah, go ahead.
To stop the hatreds among us. And
1
I'm
minute?
not talking about.
2 minutes?
2 minutes. Sorry. It's okay, it's okay.
Go ahead.
To stop the hatreds between everybody.
I got you, but do you think the liturgy and the language we use should focus on that?
No, they don't.
But you think it should?
It's, that, in my opinion.
Anybody have a word of something that you would add or include to make a difference? So that's your homework, right? Think about what you would. It might be an ability to shift and change the way people think. So I wish everybody, if I don't see you before Shana Tova U'Tukah, it will be an afternoon of Yom Kippur. All of you want to come. Hey, you will have a bagel, the lots.